Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today I want to talk with you about the challenges in remote work layoffs. Handling layoffs is a challenge for companies that are shifting to remote work, full-time remote work. And here is where you really need to think about planning for the whole employee life cycle, including the offboarding part of it. So onboarding, that's obviously important, but you want to think about offboarding. That's a part of an effective remote and hybrid work strategy. One of the biggest challenges I've seen with clients I've helped figure out a remote work policy for the whole life cycle is impersonal layoffs. And that's something that I really worked with them to mitigate. There's a natural lack of personal interaction in remote work. And of course, if you think about layoffs, they were traditionally done in person. So a person was called into their manager's office. There was a conversation where they were laid off and the manager could be compassionate and support them. That face-to-face conversation was more compassionate than the remote layoffs, which tend to take place over email. And they're seen as cold and insensitive, and they harm employee morale, company culture. There's even a lot of risk of legal action, of negative press. And that happened at Google, Twitter, Amazon, and Meta when they were laying off people in 2022, 2023, the era of the tech layoffs. And to address that, you want to handle remote work layoffs not in that manner, that it's impersonal manner. You want to have a meeting, one-on-one meeting between a manager and an employee, where you tell them on a video conference call that they're getting laid off. You have a conversation, you tell them about how you'll be supporting them in their transition, in their offboarding process. You want to be empathetic. You don't want to do email layoffs. So that lack of personal care and empathy are not going to be as much of an issue for smaller companies. They won't get as much negative press. Of course, they'll still have the hit to employee morale and culture, but I'd have seen them even in organizations that are small, that are medium-sized, that have some egregiousness to them. For example, PagerDuty CEO Jennifer Tejada, she quoted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in a layoff email. That's not great. That showed a lack of serious lack of care and empathy, and that got a lot of negative press. Now, another challenge, that's one challenge, that impersonal, the danger of lack of empathy, care, concern, and the consequence, PR and legal as a result. Another challenge is equipment retrieval. Remote work, of course, has staff using company-owned equipment in their home, and retrieving equipment during layoffs can be challenging, time-consuming, costly, and you need to make sure that there's a clear process for how to return equipment. So clear policies and procedures in place to have the process be as smooth and efficient as possible. Now, you don't necessarily want to get all the equipment back. For example, some furniture that you send to the employee and they put together, maybe a standing desk, it just may be very impractical to return it. Is the employee really going to disassemble a desk and send it to you? Probably not. And sending someone to their house to disassemble it and return it is just, usually it's not cost effective. So you want to also think about how leaving furniture with staff can result in tax implications, because that's likely to be considered as payment to staff which must be taxed. And solution that my clients are working with and that have been effective is that HR which should tell the laid off staff to donate the equipment and furniture, whatever you're leaving with them, to charity, which means it won't end up on the employee's W-2 form or whatever other tax form that they're using, because it's a donation. Now, whether they donated it, whether they didn't, who knows, right? But at least it's off your hands as the employer. Okay, third challenge, legal requirements. What you want to recognize is that different jurisdictions have different legal requirements, and the laws can be complex to navigate, especially for companies that have employees in multiple countries, multiple states as well as countries, but especially multiple countries. So you need to really be aware of what's going on in each jurisdiction to make sure to be compliant with things like notice periods, severance packages, and benefits. And this is going to be depends on the country. For example, France has more stricter redundancy requirements than the United States, and some states in the US have more strict redundancy requirements than others, at will states versus not. And so you want to know the laws that are going to be applicable for various companies, because you can get fines, legal action, reputational damage. Non-compliant layoffs also harm the morale and productivity of remaining staff, so you want to be thinking about that, besides legal problems for companies. Staff may often feel that they're treated unfairly if you don't comply with the local legal regulations, and they may rat you out to the authorities. So, to mitigate the risk of that, seek legal advice and guidance, understand the laws and regulations in all jurisdictions, and comply with requirements during the layoff process. Again, your employees may bring that information to the authorities if you don't, because they may feel it's unfair and adjust because of what they're used to in their context. Now, another challenge I see, which is distinct, is a difficulty in assessing remote work performance. When employees work remotely, it's difficult for managers to observe their work, so there might be poor evaluations, and so you might make layoff decisions that are based on incorrect information. And that is an example that I want to share with you. So there was an example of an IT company that laid off a really great remote staff member because the manager lacked a personal connection with her and just didn't see how good she was doing. So that's a big problem, that you might just not notice how well a remote employee is doing. You might favor those who are in person, or just people you click with on a personal level who are working fully remotely. You might click with them and you might underestimate their value. And so this is not good. Another example I want to share with you is a financial services company that laid off several staff critical to the success of a project because it didn't evaluate the performance aspect of what would happen with that layoff. It was making a broader series of layoffs, and if it was happening in the office, they likely would have caught that, oh, there's an important project which these staff are working on. In a remote setting, they didn't catch this, and that led to a number of delays, increased costs, and loss of credibility for the company. So you want to track that as well. Where are the different staff working? Because there are several staff, again, who are not from the same team, but from different teams who are collaborating on an inter-team project who just happened to be laid off. So that wasn't great. And there can be some cognitive biases you want to be aware of. So cognitive biases are the dangerous judgments we make because of how our minds are wired. And they play a significant role in assessment errors of employees. One is the confirmation bias, where we look for information that confirms our beliefs and ignore information that contradicts them. So managers often have preconceived notions about remote staff, which negatively affects their performance evaluation and leads to unfair and inaccurate layoff decisions. Not great. Another problem is the empathy gap, where we underestimate other people's feelings and their contributions, and that results in us undervaluing the remote employees' contributions. And so that is a challenge, and underestimating their feelings. That's another area of challenge, not simply in their performance evaluation, but more broadly in how they will react to layoffs. Another issue is the proximity bias, where we favor those who are physically near with us with personal relationships. And so remote employees can often be overlooked. And in fact, we have a number of research studies showing that remote employees who are higher performing often tend to be laid off or not promoted, despite them being higher performing, higher productivity, because managers don't rate them accurately. So it's essential to train managers to overcome these biases. And that's how you navigate layoffs in the remote work era. The remote work has definitely brought some new challenges to the offboarding process. So you want to address the 4 issues we discussed to have sensitivity, effectiveness, and compliance in layoffs, and have proper policies and procedures to mitigate the negative impact on employees who are remaining in your company, as well as those who are leaving your company. And navigating these complexities effectively is what will ensure well-being of employees, your existing employees and your laid-off employees, and the success of your company in the remote work era. All right, I hope you've benefited from this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show.